That's okay. Sort of. I have a cold, and when I get up to do on days that I'm doing a message, I get up way earlier than I usually do. And so I took medicine to help me do this today. And when I got here for first service, I realized I wasn't entirely sure if I took Dayquil or NyQuil.
Oh, no.
By the end of first message, I'm fairly certain it was NyQuil. So, it's my theme for the message. I may have to call Dave up to translate. I'm not sure. So, we'll see what happens. So, for 11 years, I worked in group homes for mentally ill adults. And I worked very closely with a lot of men and women during that time. I talked with them through some of the worst moments of their life. And some of those stories that I heard during that time, it made a significant impact on me. And one of them, in particular, stays with me really strongly. And I want to tell you her story today. I'm going to call her Jane. That's not really her name, but that's what I'm going to call her. And so Jane, she grew up in a Christian home, to a nice family. She did well in school. She sang in the choir. And when she was 16, she started to show symptoms of bipolar disorder. So she would, her mood would get so elevated, so high, that she would lose touch with reality. That she would speak so quickly that people couldn't understand her. And she would go days without sleeping. And then at other times, she would get so low that she would go days without leaving her room. And her mind would go kind of dark to the point where she couldn't remember ever having a happy day in her life and didn't think that she would ever have one in the future. And so she tried to cope with this in the way a lot of people try to cope with this, is that she used alcohol. And it made things so very much worse. And one night, after a 2-day binge, she found herself on a stranger's roof, poised at the edge, ready to jump. And she sort of came to her senses. She came to herself in that moment, realized what she was doing, and made the choice that she did not want to jump. But she fell anyway. And she fell 3 stories to the ground. And she broke her wrists, and she broke her legs, and she broke her back. And in the recovery from this fall, that's when she became addicted to her painkillers. And that started a 3-year free fall for her of addiction, cycling through mania and depression. And during this time, she was arrested multiple times. She was hospitalized multiple times. She was robbed. She was beaten. She was raped. By the time she was 21, she was friendless, and she was homeless, and she was hopeless. Have you ever heard the term rock bottom? I'm sure you've heard rock bottom before, right? It's a real place. It's an absolutely real place. It probably may be only one of the realest places that you can go. And she went there, and she found Jesus waiting there for her. She decided she wanted to live again. And so she went to a church. And there were some kind people there, and they talked to her, and they listened to her, and they helped her find a place to stay. And she got psychiatric treatment, and she got into a 12-step program. She worshiped on Sunday morning. She joined a Bible study group. She prayed fervently, and her suffering remained. Her illness was as fierce as ever. Her physical pain was very, very real. And her temptation to use drugs was a constant battle. But now she had hope. She held on to Jesus through it. She got to know him better and better, and Jane began to recover her life. She moved through the 12 steps, and she became a sponsor. And it was in that role that she discovered that her pain could serve. Her story and experiences and suffering helped her to help other people. She understood the pain and the shame and the despair and the temptation that people were given voice to because she had felt the same exact thing. And she listened to people and their story, and they listened to her when she gave guidance because she was an authority on suffering. And she helped a lot of people that way. And in the helping, she found purpose. Purpose for her pain and purpose for her life. Her pain could serve. And the more she served, the closer she felt to Jesus. And the closer she felt to Jesus, the more she wanted to serve, and the more she felt herself heal. The temptation, it wasn't gone, but the shame was. The struggle wasn't gone, but the loneliness was. And the pain, it wasn't gone, but the hopelessness and the helplessness was. She told me that she never felt healthier and more alive than when she was helping someone else. It was a profound lesson to me. And she was a very good teacher. The pain that you're going through, or the pain that you'll eventually go through, it doesn't have to cripple you. It doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to get the last word on you. And that's a heavy way to start a message. I apologize for that. But this is a heavy topic. If you've been here for the last 3 weeks, you know that we've been walking through some really stark realities. Life on this planet is hard. The things don't always go the way you think they're going to go. In fact, they usually don't. And sometimes you seem like you're wandering through the desert for a long time. A long time without any rescue. And we've called these seasons challenged faith. Times when God doesn't deliver us from our struggle, but instead says, I'm going to be there with you in the struggle. And this can be a major challenge for us because as we develop in our faith with God, it can completely shake us. Because a lot of us have been taught that God's purpose, God's job is to help us out of our pain and suffering. And what we've been saying for the last 3 weeks is that his promise to be with us in the end is far better than simply getting us out of whatever it is we're going through. And I know it doesn't feel that way in the middle. I know it doesn't feel that way in the middle. But I truly believe that God can use the darkest part of our life to change both us and the world. Have you ever thought about your suffering that way? That God doesn't necessarily give you your suffering, but at the same time, He doesn't want your suffering to go to waste. Think about that for a second before you react to it. We're going to have pain and suffering. That's part of life, right? It's inevitable. God doesn't want that inevitable pain to be meaningless. Your tragedy, your struggle, your pain can be an agent for healing. And that's how we're going to wrap up this series. We're going to look at a part of pain and suffering that maybe we haven't looked at before. During the last few weeks, we've been exploring the journey of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt to a land that was promised to them by God. And it should have been a smooth and easy trip, but it wasn't. It was difficult and really, really slow. So let's finish the story. We're going to be looking at the beginning of the book of Joshua. And at this point, the Israelites, they've arrived. They're ready to walk in. Moses has died, but God has chosen Joshua to be their new leader. And God speaks to Joshua before they cross the river into their new home. And God says this. He says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. God is coming through with his promise. The pain that they had endured, it wasn't meaningless. Their struggle had forced them to face truths about themselves. It had motivated them to change, and it had built their character. And now, in front of them is this fulfillment of God's promise, their own homeland, a place where they're going to be blessed and in turn bless the world. So maybe you're thinking, okay, that was their pain. That's the way that God showed up for them. He gave them a country. That's really nice. But what about me? Where's my struggle taking me? And that's a fair question. If you have a Bible with you or an app on your phone, you can take a look at 2 Corinthians 1 with me for a moment. This is the Apostle Paul talking. And he's writing to a young church in the city of Corinth, which is in Greece. And this church was being bombarded with temptation and idol worship and false teaching. And so Paul wrote this. He said, all praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. God is our merciful Father and the source of all comfort. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they're troubled, we'll be able to give them the same comfort God's given us. And Paul's speaking from experience. He wrote this letter from Macedonia. And the Macedonian church was enduring intense persecution. The people there were experiencing suffering that they felt was beyond their ability to endure. They felt crushed by it. And yet, through that, and through all the other things that Paul had experienced and suffered through, he understood that God, he doesn't waste anything, not even our pain. God comforts us so that we can comfort others. And by comfort, I'm not talking about a hug with like small circles and a pat on the back and saying, they're there, everything's going to be okay. Paul's talking about God's presence. Comfort is God's presence, something that gives us peace, a sense of wholeness. It gives us strength. And out of that experience, we learn how to do likewise. How to bring peace and strength into other people's lives. The pastor, Rick Warren, he says this. Your greatest ministry will flow out of your pain, not out of your strengths or your talents, but out of the painful experiences of your life. It's your weaknesses that help other people in their need, not your strengths. Do you believe that? Do you believe that your greatest impact in this life will actually flow out of your pain? It doesn't seem like life should work this way, does it? But this is exactly how God does some of his most impressive work in this world. Rick Warren, when he wrote those words, it was after the suicide of his son. And he goes on to say this. He says, don't waste your pain. If you hide it and hold it back, it doesn't do any good. But if you're honest with God and yourself and with other people, God can use the thing that you hate the most in your life, that you're most disappointed by, and that you wish had never happened. God says back to you, you can't change what happened to you, but I can use it for your benefit and for my purposes. When you're willing to share your brokenness, I can use it to help other people. Think about that for a moment. Your pain, your brokenness, the worst time in your life can be used not only to transform you, but others as well. God says, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. And Paul says that God comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they're troubled, will be able to give them the same comfort that God has given us. Pain, it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to get the last word on us. He will be with us in our pain, and he'll use it. The more that we allow him to work on us, the more that he's going to work through us. The more that we give him our pain, the more he'll transform it into something that heals. It's okay if you're not ready to believe that. But just stay with me for just a few more moments. I want to tell you 3 stories. 3 stories that have beautiful beginnings, terrible beginnings, but beautiful endings. I think it was Nightfall. The first story is about a woman named Annie Lilburn. And Annie, she grew up in a chaotic home. At the age of 9, she was abused by an older girl. And this started a pattern of abuse for her. She met people, and they used her. This became her normal. And her experience